The first thing Officer Eli Turner noticed was the dog's stillness. Not the calm kind. This was the rigid, aching stillness of loyalty pushed past reason. A German shepherd sat at the edge of Miller's Creek, mud dark on its chest, eyes fixed on the water like it was waiting for something to breathe again. Beside the dog lay a pair of small sneakers, soaked through, neatly placed as if someone believed order might stop a disaster from finishing its work. Eli had seen abandoned things before, but never something that felt like it was watching him back. The creek had flooded 3 days earlier, swollen by mountain rain that came fast and left faster, the way storms did out here. Miller's Creek usually behaved, ankle-deep water, lazy bends, but when it rose, it tore at the land like it had something to prove. Officer Eli Turner parked his cruiser on the gravel shoulder and shut the engine off. The silence rushed in immediately, thick and uncomfortable. No birds. No wind. Just the steady, low rush of water moving south. The dog didn't turn when Eli stepped out. "Hey, buddy," Eli said, keeping his voice low. He'd learned a long time ago that animals understood tone better than words. The German shepherd sat upright, muscles tight beneath wet fur. One ear twitched, but its gaze stayed locked on the creek. Eli crouched slowly, eyes tracking what the dog was guarding. The shoes were small, maybe a size 1 or 2. Pink laces, scuffed toes. The kind kids wore until the soles peeled off and parents said they'd replace them next month. They were placed side by side. Not tossed. Not washed up together. Placed. Eli felt the familiar tightening behind his ribs, the warning sign his instincts had learned to send before his brain caught up. He pulled on latex gloves and reached toward the shoes. A low growl rolled out of the dog's chest. Eli froze. "It's all right," he said. "I'm not taking them. Just looking." The growl stopped, but the dog leaned forward, teeth barely visible. "Not aggressive. Protective. Someone you love?" Eli asked quietly. The dog's tail didn't move. Eli straightened and scanned the tree line. No footprints that weren't half erased by water. No torn clothing snagged on branches. Nothing that screamed emergency, except the shoes and the dog, and the way the air felt like it was holding its breath. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Turner. I'm at Miller's Creek, North Bend. I've got a possible missing juvenile. Found unattended footwear and a canine exhibiting guarding behavior." Static, then, "Copy, Turner. Any sign of the child?" "Negative," Eli said. "But it doesn't feel old." He ended the call and crouched again, this time a few feet back. "What's your name?" he asked the dog, knowing it wouldn't answer. The shepherd finally looked at him. Its eyes were dark and wet, rimmed red like it hadn't slept. There was mud caked into its paws, and one flank bore a shallow cut that had dried crooked. "You didn't leave," Eli said. "That's something." The dog's ears flicked toward the trees, then back to the creek. Something moved in Eli's memory, an old case, years back, involving a boy and a river and a father who swore he'd only turned his back for a minute. That case had ended with divers and a body bag and a town that never quite forgave itself. Eli pushed the thought away. "Okay," he said. "We'll do this the right way." By the time Deputy Mara Vance arrived, the sky had dulled to a washed-out gray. Mara stepped out of her truck, took one look at the shoes, and swore under her breath. "Jesus," she said. "Please tell me this isn't what it looks like." "I can't," Eli replied. Mara crouched near the dog. "Hey there, handsome. You waiting for someone?" The dog didn't move. "He won't let anyone touch the shoes," Eli said. Mara nodded slowly. "That's not random behavior." "No," Eli agreed. She stood and glanced toward the creek. "You think the kid went in?" "I think the dog thinks the kid's still there," Eli said. They stood in silence for a moment. The water moved on, indifferent. Mara broke it. "Search and rescue's tied up east with a landslide." Eli exhaled. "Of course they are." "We can start a ground sweep," she said. "I'll call in volunteers." "Keep it tight," Eli said. "No rumors." Mara's jaw tightened. "In a town this small?" "I know," he said. "But try." She nodded and walked back to her truck. Eli stayed with the dog. The first name came an hour later. A woman from Pine Hollow called dispatch, voice shaking, asking if anyone had seen her grandson. "Name's Noah Pike," she said. "He's 7. He was supposed to be playing in the yard with Duke." "Duke?" Eli looked at the German shepherd. "Does Duke come home when he's called?" Eli asked gently. The dog's ears flattened. Eli closed his eyes for a moment. They canvassed the Pike property by noon. It sat less than a mile upstream, a weathered farmhouse with sagging steps and a chain-link fence that leaned more than stood. Noah's grandmother, Ruth Pike, stood on the porch twisting her hands together, eyes darting between the officers and the trees. "I told my son the fence wasn't enough," she said. "I told him." "Where is your son now?" Eli asked. "At work," Ruth said. "Logging camp. No signal." Eli nodded. "We'll reach him." Ruth's gaze dropped to Duke, who sat at her feet now, unmoving. "He won't eat," she whispered. "He won't leave the creek." "When was the last time you saw Noah?" Mara asked. Ruth swallowed. "Yesterday morning. He took his shoes off before going down to the water. Said they'd get wet." Eli felt something twist. "You didn't stop him?" Mara asked, too sharp. Ruth flinched. "He goes down there all the time. Duke's always with him." "Always with him." Eli made a note he didn't want to make. The search stretched into evening. Flashlights cut thin paths through brush and shadow. Volunteers moved quietly, as if sound itself might scare something away. Duke stayed at the creek, refusing water, refusing food. Eli knelt beside him again as the sun dipped low. "You don't think he's gone?" Eli said. The dog leaned forward, whining softly. "Dogs know," a voice said behind him. Eli turned. Sheriff Cal Morgan stood a few feet back, hands on his belt. Cal had been sheriff longer than Eli had been alive. He carried himself like the town's weight sat square on his shoulders. "They know when it's over," Cal continued. "And when it's not." "You think the kid's alive?" Eli asked. Cal didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the shoes, now bagged and tagged but still lying where they'd been found. "I think," Cal said slowly, "that someone's lying." Eli looked up. "About what?" Cal met his gaze. "About when that boy went missing." Eli felt a chill. "You think this wasn't an accident?" "I think accidents don't leave shoes lined up," Cal said. Night fell hard. At 9:43 p.m., Duke stood. His ears snapped forward. His body angled toward the woods, not the creek. Eli rose with him. "You hear something?" Duke took off. Eli ran after him, heart pounding, branches whipping his arms. His radio crackled uselessly as he pushed deeper into the trees, trusting instinct over protocol. "Duke!" Eli shouted, then stopped himself. The dog didn't need calling. The shepherd slowed near a stand of pines, sniffing the air, then pawing at the ground. Eli's flashlight beam caught fabric. A child's jacket, snagged on a root. Fresh. Eli's breath came shallow. He keyed his radio with shaking fingers. "I've got something," he said. "And I don't think this ends at the creek." Duke sat beside the jacket, eyes lifted to Eli, waiting. Not for orders. For trust. The woods beyond Miller's Creek had a different kind of silence. Not the open, rushing quiet of the creek, but a suffocating, pressed-down hush, where every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot and the wind itself seemed reluctant to move. Eli kept his flashlight sweeping side to side, its beam catching dew on leaves, the silver flash of spider webs, the occasional glint of mud-caked rock. Duke padded ahead, ears flicking, nose low, every movement precise. He was like a shadow, but more than that, like a warning. The jackets, shoes, and now this jacket, they were all breadcrumbs, but breadcrumbs that didn't make sense. The child had gone missing hours before anyone noticed, yet everything left behind suggested care, or at least intention. Eli's gut told him this wasn't a simple case of a kid wandering off. Someone had been watching, waiting, and maybe even hurting him. "Eli," Mara's voice cut through the silence, thin over the radio. "You seeing this?" He waved her closer. She crouched beside him, breath visible in the cold night air. "There's footprints," Eli said. But not just the kids. Someone else's. Fresh. Mara's brow furrowed. That's impossible. We combed this area this afternoon. Maybe they circled, Eli said. Maybe they wanted to confuse us. Mara nodded, eyes scanning the shadows. Or maybe they knew we'd come looking. Eli clenched his jaw. He'd dealt with desperate parents, he'd dealt with lost teens, but something about the combination of Duke's obsession and the deliberate placement of the shoes and jacket made him feel like the town itself was holding its breath. "Over here," Duke barked once, soft but firm. He was pawing at the ground near a cluster of pine roots. Eli moved closer, crouching. There, half buried under a tangle of roots and leaves, was a small, torn backpack. A faint smell of sweat and river water clung to it. Eli opened it slowly. Inside were a few scattered toys, a notebook, and a crumpled drawing of a sun, smiling over what looked like a house with a tall fence. The edges of the paper were damp. The first thought was relief. The child was alive, or at least had been alive recently. Then a second, darker thought followed. Someone had been here. Someone had left this, almost like a clue. Mara crouched beside him, shaking her head. Why leave something like this if you didn't want to be found? "Control," Eli said softly. "It's about control." They pressed on, the trail now more defined. Footprints led down a slope toward the creek's southern bend, but the direction was twisted, erratic. Whoever had taken Noah, or whoever had been near him, knew the woods. Knew how to leave the right signs for animals and humans alike. The forest opened into a clearing, and Eli's light fell on a small cabin, obscured by overgrowth and shadow. Smoke spiraled lazily from a chimney. "Occupied," Mara whispered. Eli's hand went to his sidearm, but he didn't draw it. Not yet. He had learned over the years that rushing in with guns first often made things worse. He needed eyes, assessment, patience. Duke stopped at the tree lean, growl low in his throat. Not the kind of growl you give a stranger. The kind that warns you against stepping over an invisible line. Eli signaled Mara. "Wait here," he said. He stepped forward alone, the flashlight cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The cabin door was slightly ajar, the wood worn, like it had been forced open many times. A faint sound reached his ears. Laughter? No, a child's voice, high-pitched, quivering. "I'm not hiding." Eli froze. The voice was close, but the cabin's shadowed interior made it impossible to see. He entered slowly, flashlight in one hand, gun low in the other. Dust motes floated in the beam, painting the air like faint snow. There, in the corner, sat a boy with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, eyes wide, clutching a small stuffed rabbit. "Noah." Eli's voice was soft, careful. The boy flinched but didn't move away. He said I had to stay," Noah whispered. Eli's heart pounded. "Who said?" From the shadowed corner, a man stepped forward. He was tall, thin, with eyes that darted between the officers and Noah like a hawk tracking prey. "Who's this?" Mara demanded. The man smiled, thin-lipped. "Neighbors. Friends of the boy." His voice had an edge that made Eli's skin crawl. Eli's instincts screamed caution. This man was not only controlling but dangerous. Every detail, his calm voice, his still hands, the way his eyes never left Noah, screamed predator. "Step back," Eli said. "This ends now." The man's smile didn't falter. "You don't understand. I'm helping him." "No," Eli said. "You're keeping him." The man's hand twitched, and for a split second, Eli thought he'd make a move. But then, almost reluctantly, he took a step back. Noah clung tighter to his rabbit. "He said if I went outside, the dog wouldn't find me." Eli felt a pang of understanding. The boy had been taught fear, manipulated into believing Duke's loyalty would only protect him if he stayed put. Mara moved forward, scanning the perimeter. "We need to secure him and the boy," she said. Eli nodded. "Duke." The German shepherd had circled the clearing, then sat, eyes fixed on Noah. The boy relaxed slightly, the first sign of trust since the shoes had been found. As they led Noah out, Eli caught the man's eyes again. Something dark lingered there. Not anger. Not fear. Calculated detachment. Someone who believed rules applied to everyone but him. Back at the Pike house, Noah's grandmother collapsed into her arms, tears falling freely. Duke sat beside her, head on her knee, panting lightly but calm now. Eli watched, chest tight. Relief was a weight that didn't sit well. He knew better than to celebrate too early. "Who was that man?" Mara asked softly, leaning close. Eli shook his head. "Someone who thought they could rewrite the rules for everyone else. And someone who's going to make this town pay for thinking he couldn't." The night stretched long and quiet after that. Noah slept in his bed for the first time in days, Ruth keeping vigil while Duke curled at the foot of the mattress. Eli sat outside on the porch, the wind brushing through the trees. The shoes were gone, bagged in evidence, but the image of their careful placement haunted him. Whoever had done this had been meticulous, patient, and cruel in a way the town wasn't ready to face. A sudden rustle behind the shed made him tense. Duke's ears twitched, growl low. Someone was watching. And Eli knew the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Pine Hollow awoke under a pale sun that did little to warm the damp earth. Mist hung low over the creek, curling like ghostly fingers around the trees, and the smell of wet pine and river mud lingered in every corner. Officer Eli Turner returned to the Pike property before sunrise, Duke padding silently at his side. The German shepherd had been restless overnight, circling the creek, whining softly, as if aware that the danger hadn't fully passed. Eli didn't speak much. He seldom did in moments like these, when instinct and fear and knowledge collided. Mara arrived shortly afterward, coffee in hand, her expression tight. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," she said quietly. "That man, he's not a one-time thing. Whoever he is, he planned this." Eli nodded, eyes scanning the creek. The morning light revealed subtle footprints in the mud, too large for Noah, too careful for wild animals. He crouched, tracing one with a gloved hand. The soil gave way beneath his fingers. The impression was fresh. "Someone is tracking the movements of the town's children," Eli murmured, more to himself than to Mara. "He's controlling what people think is random." Mara's jaw tightened. "And the shoes, the jacket, the backpack, it's all part of a game." "Yes," Eli said, his voice low. "A game that could have ended worse if Duke hadn't been there." They spent the morning retracing the route Noah had taken before the abduction, mapping footprints, broken branches, and scuff marks on trees. Volunteers from the town arrived, eager but nervous, their presence a constant reminder of the tension that had gripped Pine Hollow. By midday, a breakthrough came. Ruth Pike, still shaken but determined, approached Eli with a photograph clutched in her hand. "This," she said, holding it out, "was in Noah's room. He drew it, said it was the man's house. Look at the window." Eli took the photo, focusing on the window of the cabin from the drawing. There it was, subtle, almost imperceptible from the surrounding wood, a broken latch. It wasn't visible from the creek. Someone had taken deliberate care to conceal it, which explained why the boy had been trapped without anyone realizing. Mara knelt beside him, eyes scanning the lines of the sketch. "He's been using these windows to enter and exit without leaving obvious tracks. He's been watching for weeks." The realization hit them both like a punch to the chest. This wasn't random, and it wasn't impulsive. This man had been preparing, observing, manipulating. Pine Hollow had been blind to his presence for longer than anyone wanted to admit. Eli rose, scanning the woods. "We need to find him before he tries again. Before someone else gets taken." The investigation led them to interviews, old permits, and town records. They discovered a man named Victor Kessler, a recluse who had moved to the outskirts of Pine Hollow years ago. Neighbors described him as polite but odd, withdrawn, intensely private. Children were warned to stay away from his property, though no one knew exactly why. Eli and Mara began piecing together a timeline. Victor had been living unnoticed, studying families, predicting routines, and preparing for the moment he could exploit the town's trust. Every clue left at the creek, the shoes, jacket, backpack, was a calculated signal to mislead searchers while keeping Noah within reach. It was moral grayness distilled into pure manipulation. And the deeper Eli dug, the more he realized that the town itself had unknowingly played a role in the unfolding nightmare. Then came the shocking twist. A local handyman, hired by Ruth for minor repairs, confessed under questioning. I saw him, the man stammered. Victor. He asked me to keep an eye on the boy. Said it was for Noah's safety. I thought he meant. I didn't know he'd. Eli felt the world tilt. Someone from the town had been complicit, even unknowingly. Trust had been fractured, stretched thin. With that, the final confrontation became inevitable. Victor's cabin was surrounded under the cover of darkness, searchlights cutting through fog like knives. Eli and Mara moved silently with local law enforcement, Duke leading the way, ears alert, muscles coiled. Inside, Victor waited, calm, almost serene. I only wanted to protect him, he said, voice steady, unafraid. The world is cruel. I saved him. No, Eli said, eyes cold. You imprisoned him. You twisted a child's life into fear for your satisfaction. A tense standoff followed, but Victor offered no resistance, almost like he had expected it. Perhaps he had calculated this, too, his capture as inevitable, his control absolute until the last moment. Noah emerged from the cabin, wrapped in a blanket, clinging to Duke. His eyes were wide, cautious, but trusting enough to follow Eli and Mara outside. The reunion with Ruth was quiet, raw, and emotional. Tears, soft sobs, and whispered reassurances filled the air. Duke circled the boy protectively, a living barrier between innocence and the darkness that had tried to touch it. In the aftermath, Pine Hollow slowly exhaled. Victor Kessler was taken into custody, his motives and actions dissected by law enforcement and psychologists alike. The moral grayness lingered in the town's conversations. How someone seemingly ordinary could manipulate trust, exploit fear, and almost succeed. Eli watched Noah playing near the creek days later, Duke lying at his side. The shoes were replaced, but the story of their discovery, the search, and the quiet heroism of a loyal dog and a determined officer remained. Eli felt a lingering weight, the reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, that trust can be broken by those you least suspect, and that the line between protection and control is thinner than anyone wants to admit. Yet in that quiet, watching Noah laugh again, Duke's ears twitching at every sound, there was a fragile, precious hope. And sometimes, Eli thought, hope was all you could cling to when shadows of truth lingered just beyond the tree line.